Well, blessings to you all. Thanks for joining us on this wonderful opportunity to explore Catholicism. My name is Father Jay. I am the administrator of our great grouping of 4 parishes here in the Pittsburgh Diocese. It's such a blessing during this time as we're trying to motor through Corona time to be able to explore the depths of our faith. This past weekend we had the grace of just hearing Jesus give the keys to the kingdom to Peter, and we see how the church continues to be an instrument of salvation for all those who want to get to know, love, and live our faith in Jesus Christ. And unfortunately today, part of our life that we live in Corona time is also natural disasters. Our dear Katie Prejean, who is going to come on today and talk about youth and all the exciting things that are going on in our church with the youth. She works out of Steubenville and is a public speaker who goes around the country. Well, a hurricane is coming through Louisiana. We're going to do a connection with her in there, and she was just evacuated. So pray for Katie and pray for all those who are being affected by this hurricane. On top of that, Katie is due to give birth in a couple of weeks. So if you're having a bad day today, think about a family that is now displaced by a hurricane. And by the way, the mommy is pregnant. So that's our dear Katie. We appreciate her. We'll reschedule her, obviously, whenever we can, reland that experiment, that wonderful conversation we were going to have. In the meantime, I thought that we are bookended, as you see behind me, these bookshelves, between 2 conventions of our parties of our country, the Democratic Convention last week and now the Republican Convention. And I thought it was maybe good to just give a laser focus on our church's teaching and on some thoughts on abortion and protecting the unborn. When Jesus Christ came, there was no doubt that one of the legacies and one of the keys to our scripture and to our Christian faith is to protect the most vulnerable. There is no human being that could be more vulnerable than a preborn baby in the womb of his dear mother. And so Abby Johnson was graced us with her presence here at Saints John and Paul in December 5th. And so I decided to rebroadcast that conference that she gave here at our church. If you haven't seen it, it's a really powerful conference, and it really hits the depth of both the testimony of a woman who endured the evil of abortion, and at the same time, very practical and hands-on advice for those who are trying to motor through our world at this point. And I thought at the same time, it's interesting to read a little bit of some of the things the popes have said about the preborn life and about abortion. Pope Francis said, "Procuring abortion is wrong, inhumane, like hiring a hitman to fix a problem. It's a contradiction to allow for a killing of human life in a mother's womb in the name of protecting other rights. How can an act that suppresses the innocent, defenseless, budding life be therapeutic, civilized, or simply humane?" asks Pope Francis. And I think it's always good to go back to the papal encyclicals, which are some of the highest forms of Catholic teaching. Obviously, you can find in the Catechism the teaching, but in Evangelium 73 and 74, we hear, and this is kind of an invitation to politicians and to this decision that all of us are going to have to make on who we're going to vote for. And with the backdrop of these political conventions going on, I thought it was good for us to continue to remind our consciences and our hearts of what the Church teaches, which says, "We urge those Catholic officials who choose to depart from Catholic teaching on the inviolable right of human life in their public life to consider the consequences for their own spiritual well-being, as well as the scandal they risk by leading others into serious sin. We call on them to reflect on the grave contradiction of assuming public roles and presenting themselves as credible Catholics when their actions on fundamental issues of human life are not in agreement with Church teaching. No public official, especially one claiming to be a faithful and serious Catholic, can responsibly advocate or actively support direct attacks on innocent human life. No appeal to policy, procedure, majority will, or pluralism ever excuse a public official from defending life to the greatest extent possible. As it is true of leaders of all walks of life, no political leader can evade the accountability for his or her exercise of power." And so we pray that this election season be influenced by a deeper desire for a culture of life, battling this awful culture of death, and especially in preserving the most precious life, the preborn baby in the womb of their mother. So I hope that this conference that Abby Johnson gives can be a great inspiration for all of you who are praying through this time, especially in our country, in the United States. And a program note before we head off to this conference, John Bergsma, Dr. John Bergsma, a great biblical scholar, somebody who is both hilarious and deep. He's going to allow us to explore Catholicism as we explore the Dead Sea Scrolls and that connection with Jesus and Scripture. It's a fascinating book that he just wrote, and he is just a tremendous, down-to-earth speaker. He teaches college kids. I love his humor that he's able to mix in. So join me next Tuesday, September 1st at 2 p.m. to have our next Exploring Catholicism with Dr. John Bergsma. Until then, enjoy the Abby Johnson Conference, and God bless.
All Abby Johnson has ever wanted to do is to help women. Her passion surrounding a woman's right to choose even led her to become a spokesperson for Planned Parenthood, fighting to enact legislation for the cause she so deeply believed in. However, she experienced a change of heart while participating in an ultrasound-guided abortion procedure. Today, Abby travels across the globe sharing her story, educating the public on pro-life issues and advocating for the unborn, and reaching out to abortion clinic staff who still work in the industry. Her story has been a media sensation, and she is often featured on Fox News and numerous other print and media programs. She is also the author of the nationally best-selling book, Unplanned, which chronicles both her experiences within Planned Parenthood and her dramatic exit. The movie adaptation of Unplanned was released in the spring of 2019, and I'm guessing quite a few of you probably saw that film. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Abby Johnson.
Thank you. Give me Oh, I forgot to do this. Thank you. Thank you so much. Jesus was up there. He is up there. I forgot. Sorry, Jesus. It is so good to be here with all of you tonight. I am from Texas, so howdy. That's not bad. It's an honor to be here with you in such a beautiful church. I love talking about life in the presence of the Lord. Amen. So I do live in Austin, Texas with my husband, Doug, and our 8 children. I know. Yeah, it's a lot. And I tell people we became pro-life and we couldn't stop breeding. More accurately, though, is that we became Catholic and couldn't stop breeding. So, gotta be open to life. I'm actually a natural family planning instructor. I hear it works. If you use it, clearly we wouldn't know. So I have no NFP clients. Nobody trusts me with their charts. So anyway, so our daughter, Grace, is 13, and then we had 4 boys in a row. They are 7, 6, 5, and 4. I know, I was there. And then we have twins, 2-year-old little girls, and then we have a 6-month-old little boy named Fulton. And our first 2 boys in that set of 4, they are 11 months apart. The second 2 boys are 14 months apart. The youngest 2 in that set are 6 months apart. And even though I move fast, I don't move quite that fast. Our youngest in the set of 4, he was actually gifted to us through open adoption. So I'll tell you that story. I was in Atlanta speaking for a pregnancy center, and I'm in this group on Facebook of about 30 women. We're all really close friends. And one of the gals in there is a sign language interpreter, and she interprets for the deaf community in her church in Maryland. And she had become friends with the woman that she interpreted for. This woman was married. She was pregnant. This was her 4th child, but this child had actually not been conceived with her husband. This woman had been the victim of a violent assault and had conceived. And she made an adoption plan for her child, and 2 weeks before her due date, she got an email from the adoptive family that said, we've been thinking about it, and we've decided that since there's a possibility that your child could also be deaf, we don't want him. So another family was called, but they weren't interested because the baby was biracial, and they wanted a white baby that looked like them. And so my friend posted in this group, and she says, hey, look, here's the situation. Please be praying. Obviously a very stressful time for this mom. And if any of you happen to know anyone who would be ready to adopt a baby coming in 2 weeks or less, please let me know. And so I saw it pop up, and I looked down at it, and I wrote, we will. And so my friend called me immediately, and she said, are you crazy? Are you nuts? What's your problem? And, Carter at the time, he was only 6 months old. And I was like, yeah, we have so many babies in our house right now. I'm not even sure we would notice another one if you threw it in. And I said, our lives are just on repeat. It's like diaper, sleep, feed, repeat. So I was like, we won't mind. So she said, well, I'm gonna tell her. I'm gonna let this mom know that I have found a family. And I was like, great, do it, because we are in. So I hung up the phone, and I thought I should call my husband now. What I really thought was, can I send this in a text? But I thought I better not. So I called him and told him, and he was a little mad. Mad's the right word. He was more panicky because, see, my husband, Doug, is actually a stay-at-home dad. So this really affects him more than me. So he didn't talk to me for a couple days, and then he finally called me and he said, I've been writing a pros and cons list. And he said, every time I think of a reason that this is crazy, this is insane, that we absolutely should not do this, he said, I look into our future, and that kid, that little boy, he's always there. And he said, I think we should do it. And I said, honey, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because the lady doing our home study is going to be there tomorrow. So would have been weird if he had said no, but. So 2 weeks later, a baby was born, and we went to Maryland to be with him and to meet his amazing mom for the first time. And we were trying to think of what we wanted to name him, and we knew we wanted to name him a name that started with the letter J, because his birth mother's name starts with J. Her 3 other children, their names start with J, so we wanted to honor her in that way. We like to name our kids a saint name and a family name. We already had the family name picked out, so we were looking for a saint name. And at that time, we'd only been Catholic for about 3 years, and there are so many saints. And so I needed some help. So I went online to like saints.com or something, and I clicked on the letter J, and I started going through the list, and nothing was really jumping out to me. I got to the bottom, and I saw St. Jude. Now, as most of you know, St. Jude in the Catholic faith is considered the patron saint of desperate or impossible cases. And I thought, you know what? That's the perfect name for this little boy, because there had to be times when his mom felt like God had given her an impossible cross to bear. There had to be moments where she felt immense desperation. When she found out she was pregnant, she went to family and friends and people in her church looking for advice, for help, for support, for anything. And the majority of them looked at her and said, well, this is the one time that abortion is okay. This is that exception. Nobody would blame you for having an abortion of this baby. Look how this baby was conceived. But she very courageously looked at them and said, it's either a baby all the time or it's a baby none of the time, and God doesn't make mistakes. But there had to be moments of desperation, of questioning, of wondering why this had happened to her. Her child being rejected 3 times in the womb before birth. Once because of how he was conceived, then again because of a possible hearing deficiency that he doesn't have, by the way, and it wouldn't have mattered if he did. And then again because of the color of his skin. I'm sure there were lots of times that she felt overwhelmed, but every day she woke up and she continued to choose life for her child. You know, I think about Jude, I think about his life. I recognize truly what a miracle it is that he is with us. But honestly, when I look around at the abortion rate in our society, I see that almost 1 million abortions are being committed every single year in the United States. Over 2,000 abortions being committed every single day in this country. And when I look at those statistics, I realize that really any child who is born into our society today is a miracle. Now, I'd love to tell you I've always stood up here and defended life. You know, that's not true. I worked for Planned Parenthood for 8 years of my life. I got involved as a college kid. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in a pro-life home. I grew up Southern Baptist. My parents are like, Catholic? How did that happen? No, they're cool with it. But we did not sit around the dinner table and talk about abortion. We did not talk about what it was to be pro-life or pro-choice. It was, late 70s, early 80s. It was a different time. Abortion wasn't in the media like it is today. Abortion was still very taboo. Nobody was standing up on a stage and shouting their abortion, right? It was just a very different time. And I think my parents just believed that because they had taught me the biblical pathway to marriage, that as long as I followed that path, then abortion would never be on the table. So why do we need to talk about something so incredibly unpleasant with our little girl? We were a family who said we were pro-life, but we were not a family who actually lived out our pro-life beliefs. I went to college. I met a woman who was working with Planned Parenthood. She was trying to actively recruit volunteers, students to go and volunteer with Planned Parenthood. Wherever there are vulnerable women, so is Planned Parenthood. And there are tens of thousands of vulnerable women on college campuses across this country, and you better believe that Planned Parenthood is trying to be right there with them. She asked me what I knew about the organization. Honestly, I knew nothing. I think that was probably the first time I'd ever even heard the name Planned Parenthood before. She started giving me all the talking points, all the things that we've all heard in the media. She started telling me that without access to Planned Parenthood, low-income women would have nowhere else to go for health care. Planned Parenthood was it if you're low income. Now, I'll be honest with you, I do not know the plight of a low income, uninsured, underinsured woman. I've always been fortunate to have health care available to me whenever I needed it. So when she told me this, I didn't have any reason to believe that she was not being honest. But here's the reality. Currently in the United States, there are approximately 600 Planned Parenthood facilities. Across the entire country, 600 Planned Parenthood facilities. There are over 10,000 federally qualified health centers that provide comprehensive health care to men, women, and children who are low income at low or no cost. Those 10,000 facilities do not include rural public health centers, hospital health centers, county health departments. It also doesn't include the over 2,500 pregnancy resource centers that provide limited medical care to women. It also doesn't include the tens of thousands of group and private practice physicians that accept government subsidy programs like Medicaid. So we are talking about 600 facilities compared to literally tens of thousands of providers, yet Planned Parenthood is the only place women can go? You see, it's a lie. But that's what happens with a lie. When someone speaks a lie enough times, people will begin to believe it is true. And then the most interesting thing happens. Then the person speaking the lie, they will begin to believe that it is true. She asked me what I thought about abortion. I told her I'd been raised pro-life. She said, that's good. She said, pro-lifers are good people. They're just sort of, misguided. Sorry to tell you. She said, these pro-lifers, they just don't understand. They don't see the big picture. They don't understand that without access to safe and legal abortion, women are going to be forced to go where? Back alleys, right? And that's going to be awful. And women, they're just going to be, just falling out, just dying all over every street corner from these back alley dangerous abortions. And these pro-lifers are just trying to take away our rights to our bodies, to do with them what we will. And then they're going to start going after our other rights. They're going to start telling us that, women no longer have the right to vote. And then they're going to really take us back. Then they're going to tell us women no longer allowed to wear pants, just skirts all the time. And I thought, well, I like pants. So I signed up immediately. And see, what I didn't know is that what took place before Roe v. Wade, so what took place before 1973 in these supposed back alley abortion facilities is actually no different than what takes place today inside of storefront legal abortion facilities. Women are still dying from abortion. Women are still getting infections from unsterilized instrumentation. Untrained staff are still performing invasive medical procedures on women. Women are still being physically and emotionally maimed for the rest of their lives because of abortion. And abortion on its face can never be safe. Why? Because in order for an abortion to be deemed successful, a unique and individual human being must be killed. You see, that is the antithesis of safety, and friends, that is why abortion can never be considered health care. But you see, I didn't know all that. And I submit to you tonight that is what the majority of women in our society do not know that leads them in the doors of the abortion industry. It's what they do not know about their bodies, their fertility, their unborn child, the abortion procedure itself, and it's what they do not know about the radical, life-changing, life-saving mercy of Jesus Christ. That's what leads them inside of those clinic doors. And people ask me all the time, Abby, how is it that you went from being this good Christian kid? I was a pretty good kid. I didn't do very many things wrong that my parents found out about. How is it that you went from being this good kid to being someone who ran an abortion clinic? How'd you go from being that kid to being someone who laid on an abortion clinic table, not once, but twice, to take the lives of my own children by abortion? Abby, how did that happen? And I guess I don't have just a silver bullet sort of answer for you tonight, except to say that it happened just a little bit at a time. Because that's the way that sin enters all of our lives. See, your sin may not be abortion, but we all have sin in our lives. And the sin in your life came into your life the same way that abortion crept into mine. And it was one little lie at a time, one little justification at a time, one little compromise at a time. And while I know that Satan, our true enemy, has to sneak around to do his work, I know that when God wants to change your life, it can literally happen in the blink of an eye. And that's what happened to me in the fall of 2009. 2009 had been an interesting year for me. In April of that year, I had been awarded Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year Award. You can hold your applause. I know you're all very proud of me. I was pretty excited. That was in April. Then we had a rough summer, and then in August of that year, I was in a budget meeting with my supervisor, and in that meeting, I was told that we were going to be doubling our abortion quota. And I thought that had to be a mistake, because for 8 years that I had been at Planned Parenthood, I had been telling my friends and my family and the media and anyone who would listen that our goal at Planned Parenthood was to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare. So, if that was the goal, and surely that was the goal because we had all said it, why were they asking me to double our abortion quota? Why did we have an abortion quota to begin with? And honestly, I thought it was a mistake. So I said something out loud to my supervisor, and she said to me, "Abby, why would we ever want to reduce the number of abortions? That's how we make our money." And I don't really remember how I justified the conversation that day, but somehow I did. And about a month later, we had a visiting physician come in from out of town. And he was explaining to me that at his own private practice abortion facility, he performed abortions differently than our protocol stated at Planned Parenthood. Our protocol was simple. We performed abortions in a blind surgical manner. So the doctor has a suction tube, he inserts that into the woman's uterus, he blindly pokes around in her uterus until he thinks he has enough blood and tissue in a glass jar. That was the only way I knew abortions to be performed. But this doctor was telling me that it's actually safer for the patient if the doctor can see what he's doing while he's performing surgery on the patient. So during abortions that he performed at his clinic, he used an ultrasound during the entire abortion procedure. Now, we used an ultrasound, but we really only did that for one reason, and that was to determine how far along the woman was in her pregnancy so that we would know how much to charge her for the abortion. But after the gestational dating was captured, the ultrasound was rolled away, and it was not used again on this patient. So as the doctor was explaining this to me, I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. I couldn't think of any other type of surgical procedure where the doctor can't see what he's doing while he's performing surgery on the patient. It was no wonder we had such a high rate of uterine perforation, where the doctor will just poke a hole right through the woman's uterus, because the doctor literally can't see when to stop pushing the instruments forward. So I went back to my supervisor and I said, if this is the safest type of abortion, why isn't this the standard care inside of Planned Parenthood? And she said, well, yes, it is safest for women. But she said, using an ultrasound during the entire abortion procedure takes up about an extra 3 minutes of time. And you see, our goal inside of Planned Parenthood was to have a woman on the table, off the table, abortion complete in 5 minutes. So if you are trying to perform anywhere between 30 to 60 abortions a day with one abortion provider, you just don't have an extra 3 minutes of time per patient. So I accepted that answer. But one of the days that the doctor was there at our facility, he asked me to come in and assist. My job was to hold the ultrasound probe on the woman's abdomen so that the doctor would be able to, in his words, visualize his target. We did the measurement. We found that the woman was 13 weeks along in her pregnancy. Now, just for clarification, By 13 weeks, everything is formed on the unborn child. Arms, legs, fingers, toes, eyes, ears, brain waves are functioning, heart is beating. Every internal organ that we sit here with today is formed on a child in the womb by 13 weeks gestation. Outside of the womb, the baby's about this big, and we can even tell if it's a boy or a girl. Now, I stood there looking at that screen feeling apprehensive because I recognized that what I was looking at really did look like a baby. I mean, I could see the profile of his face. I could see his little nose and his mouth, and I could see his arms and legs. But I knew that this couldn't be a baby because I had been taught abortion science. Abortion science teaches us that a pregnancy only magically turns into a baby when the mother decides that the pregnancy is wanted. And if the mother never decides that that pregnancy is wanted, then it's never a baby. Then it's just pregnancy tissue, waste, something to be discarded. And this woman was here for an abortion, so certainly this pregnancy was unwanted, so it couldn't be a baby, but it really looked like a baby. And I stood there watching the screen, and I could see the suction instrument. The suction wasn't yet turned on. I could see that going into the woman's uterus, and I could see it getting closer and closer to the side of this baby. And when it finally touched his side, he jumped. And he began flailing his arms and legs as if he was trying to move away from the abortion instrument, but there was nowhere for him to go. When the doctor had everything in the right position, he asked the technician to turn on the suction machine, and he said, "Beam me up, Scotty." And I think people make the assumption that what I saw next was the worst part, that seeing a child become torn apart in his mother's womb would be the worst part. And that was bad, but I knew that was going to happen. That actually wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that when I had the opportunity to do something, when I had the opportunity to intervene on the behalf of this innocent life, I just stood there. I did nothing. I mean, I remember wanting to sit this woman up and to say, look what's happening to your baby. Make them stop. I remember wanting to yell out, stop. But I didn't. I just stood there and I watched. In just a few seconds, the screen was black, and I knew that that meant the abortion had been successful. And I remember in that moment dropping the ultrasound probe. Just for a few seconds, I remember looking down at my hands. They were just sort of hovering over this woman's belly where life had just been. And I realized how much power we had in our hands. It was these hands that were the first to hold my daughter when she came out of my womb. It was these hands that patted her bottom when she was crying and needed comfort. It was these hands that nursed her when she was hungry. It was these hands that helped to sustain the life of my child, and these same hands that helped to take life. How powerful our hands can be. And I didn't know what my life was going to look like. But I knew that I didn't ever want these hands to participate in death again. I remember going back to my office, and I looked out my window, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know who to turn to, and I saw these two women outside of my office praying. And for 8 years that I worked at Planned Parenthood, there had been people outside of my clinic praying. And I knew that they were primarily praying for the women going in, but I knew they were praying for us too, for the workers. They told us that they were. And I saw them praying, and I thought, well, I don't know what else to do, so maybe I'll pray too, like really pray for the first time in 8 years. And so I did, and I was asking God, where do I go? Who do I turn to? I don't even know who to talk to about all of this that I'm feeling right now. And I felt like God was telling me to go to them, to go to these pro-life people, these people who I had believed were my enemy for 8 years of my life. And when I felt him telling me that, I said to God, no, give me somebody else. But I just couldn't shake it. I knew that's where I needed to go. So I ran out the back door. I got in my car. I could have walked to their office because it was conveniently located next door. But I thought that would look suspicious. So I got in my car and I, drove the 50 yards. And I pulled in their parking lot. I walked in their back door. I sat on their ugly, ugly couch. And I just wept. Because I didn't know what to say. There were no words that could adequately express the remorse that I felt in that moment. And so I just cried. And in those moments, I really was just crying out to God, just pleading with him. And I began counting. And I started counting the days and the years and the number of patients, and I realized that in the 8 years that I had been at Planned Parenthood, I had helped to facilitate over 22,000 abortions. And I didn't know how to live with that kind of sin. I didn't know how to live with that kind of burden. And if I'm very honest with you, I didn't even know if I wanted to. But in that moment of just complete emptiness and desperation, I felt God speak to me in a way that I had never felt up until that moment, and I don't think I've ever felt it since. And he said to me, Abby, there is absolutely nothing you can ever do to make up for what you have done. But because of my grace, my radical grace and mercy for you. It's over. It's done. And it was like he just kept reminding me over and over again that he had won. I decided I would go ahead and put in my resignation to Planned Parenthood, but not to worry. I gave him a good 5 minutes notice. And I told the pro-life group, the Coalition for Life, that I was going to be resigning that day, and so they sent a young man out to the sidewalk to be there, just to be sure that I was able to leave without incident. His name is Bobby. And I was walking out of the office. I was carrying my last load of items to my car, and I waved to Bobby, and I told him I'd be by their office later on in the week. I got in my car, and I pulled out of that driveway for the last time, and I took a left. And I immediately came to a stoplight, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and Bobby didn't know I could see him. He didn't know I was watching him, but I saw him. He put his arms in the air, and he fell to his knees. Because, there had to be times where they looked at me and they said, she's never going to leave. God, why are you even prompting us to pray for this woman? She's mean to us. She mocks us. She mocks our faith. If there's one thing I can say about the film Unplanned, it's this. The directors were very generous in their portrayal of me in the film. I was probably never that nice to the people on the sidewalk. I was terrible to them. But every day they continued to pray for me, probably sometimes in disbelief, wondering if that day would ever come, thinking that maybe it would never come. And then one day, just like that, it did. You see, I'm standing in front of you today as a testament to the power of conversion. No one is beyond the power of conversion because no one is beyond the power of Jesus Christ. And that's what this movement must be about. It must be about conversion of heart. It can't just be about saving one baby. It's got to be much more than that. It's got to be about conversion of heart for the women who are scared, who are in crisis, who feel vulnerable, alone. See, we as a movement have to be able to show them that we are ready to protect them, to provide safety for them, that we are willing to accompany them. Pope Francis talks about the Gospel of Accompaniment. Accompaniment is hard, especially when people's lives are messy. But accompaniment is still necessary if you really want to see a change of heart. Because a change of heart brings about a change in our culture. And we're not really fighting legislatively. More importantly is that we're fighting for hearts and souls and minds. Now, I'm not saying that pro-life legislation isn't important. It's very important. And I work diligently in pro-life legislation, both at the federal and state level. But our goal cannot just be to make abortion illegal and say, okay, we've done our job. Our goal as a movement must be to make abortion unthinkable so that women who are in crisis would never even consider darkening the door of a facility that would exploit them and take the life of their child. That they know there is safety, there is protection, there is accompaniment right here in this movement, and dare I say, right here in the arms of the church. And it's not just about the women. This is about conversion of heart for the men involved. See, I believe one of the primary antidotes to abortion is fatherhood. But we live in a society where almost half of young men are growing up without fathers in the home. And if I'm perfectly honest with you, I feel like this is an area, church, where we have failed. We have failed to step up and stand in the gap with these young men. We have failed to show them what it is to be men of God, what it is to be godly husbands, to be godly fathers, to be protectors, to be providers. I mean, really, we have failed our young people, period, because we have told our young people that being a Christian is fun. It's not fun. Are you kidding? Sin is fun. That's why we want to do it. It's not fun to be a Christian because it is countercultural. It's hard. The things that are worth doing are hard. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be fun. And so the minute that our children see that it's not really fun to be a Christian, then they think that God has failed them. They think that there is no God. And so they leave the church because we have sold them a false gospel. We have convinced our children that God is only concerned about their happiness. I believe that God is far less concerned about our happiness and far more concerned about our holiness. Holiness is not always fun. But look at our young people. The highest rate of teen suicide ever in history. Because they're searching and they're looking for something that they just can't seem to find. And guys, we aren't doing a good enough job of showing them what they're looking for. We aren't doing our best to evangelize to them. We aren't giving them our best. And if our church is going to continue to grow, it will be because young people stuck with their faith. Guys, I don't know what the answer to all the things that plague us in our society. I don't know what the answers are. But I know that they begin and end with Jesus Christ and his church. And so I guess I'm asking you today, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do about it? Because this is not your pro-life activity for the year. This is not what it is to be pro-life, actually, at all. Being pro-life is messy. It's hard. It's living life with others. It's sacrificing yourself for others. It's upholding the dignity of human life to all people, even people we don't like. even those that work in the abortion clinic, even people like me. What are you willing to do? Because I don't know about you, but I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of a morally decaying society teaching and indoctrinating our children in the school system, telling them that sexual perversion is normal. I'm tired of innocent babies being killed, over 2,000 of them a day, in the name of choice. And I'm tired of the apathy that I see among Christians. When we are silent, we are complicit. I'm tired of people worrying about who they're going to offend by speaking the truth. I'm tired of the injustice that I see in our world today. And I'm really, really tired of Christians claiming to care about social justice and then discarding life in the womb. If there was ever a time for Christians to stand up and to say, enough, is right now. It is right now. Enough. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened. I don't know when Christians decided that the Christian thing to do was to lay down and be a doormat to the evil that surrounds us in our society. I don't know when it happened, but I'm here to tell you that I am saying enough. And I am hoping that you will all have the courage to stand on the foundation of our faith, to stand on solid Christian principles, and to put your hand up to this evil and to say, no more, enough. We will stand up for those who have no voice. We will stand up for our children. We will not just lay down and let society trample all over us and take away our rights and take away our religious liberties. We are here to say enough. We're going to do Q&A in a few minutes, and I want to answer your questions, but during that time, I want you all to really be thinking about how you're going to make a difference in this movement for life. Because you're not here by accident. And you're actually really not here to hear me. You're here because God has some sort of plan for you. God has business to do with you, and he wants to do it here tonight. That's why you're here. And I don't know how God's calling you. I don't know what your gifts and your talents are. But maybe it's to volunteer to work in a pregnancy resource center here in your community. Who's here with the Pregnancy Resource Center? Somebody is here. Stand up. You guys need volunteers? Yeah, all the time. Yes, they need volunteers. They need you. See, when I worked at Planned Parenthood, we actually paid our volunteers, which I think technically makes them not volunteers anymore. They don't have that. But see, you can do that. You can pay your volunteers when you're making over $1 billion a year and more than half of that coming from your tax dollars. So you can pay your volunteers. These centers don't have that sort of luxury. They need you. They're dependent on you. And you may say, I don't have anything to give to a pregnancy center. Not so fast. You have no idea what that center might be in need of right now. A gift, a talent that you could fill. And you say, well, all I know how to do is change light bulbs. They might need all of their light bulbs changed right now. You don't know. You don't know until you talk to them. They're on the front lines every day. They're going into battle every single day. They're putting on armor and they're walking into this culture every single day, fighting for our kids, fighting for your grandkids. They need you to stand and fight with them. They need you to stand beside them. They need you to battle with them. So maybe that's one way that you serve in the pro-life movement. Who here goes and prays out in front of an abortion clinic? Stand up. Now, I don't want to shame any of you, but every single one of you should have been standing. I'm just saying. If there was a facility that opened in Pittsburgh, that's where we are, right? Yeah, Pittsburgh. There's a facility that opened in Pittsburgh, and they advertised as a facility that will euthanize children up until 2 years old. What do you think the outcry would be in the city of Pittsburgh? You think people would be going out there? You think people would be doing anything possible, anything they could to stop women from going in there and killing their babies? I do. I'd be out there. I'd make a trip up here just to be out there to do it. Yet every day, there's clinics here in your community that kill babies with the same inherent dignity, the same worth, just a different size. Where are you? My friend David B. Wright says that he's one of the founders of 40 Days for Life. He says, whenever there's an abortion clinic open and there are not Christians outside praying, then that clinic might as well have a big sign up that says, this clinic is open with the permission of the Christian church. There's no excuse. We should be there. Even when they're not open, you can still go out and pray. I go and pray on Sundays outside of abortion clinics all the time because I travel a lot during the week, so I don't have a lot of time. But when I'm home, I try to go out to the clinic, and a lot of times, I may go after Mass. You think your prayers are any less valuable just because they're not open? You think that witness to the community is any less valid because they're not open? Maybe that's how God wants you to get involved in the clinic, in the pro-life movement. Maybe it's in the legislative fight. Maybe it's in all three. I don't know. I don't know how God's calling you. But tonight, I want all of you, while we're doing Q&A, to be thinking about the commitment that you are going to make to our Lord to defend his greatest creation, the most innocent among us. So, I'm ready for Q&A, if you're ready.
Yeah. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. This is going to be challenging with all these people, but anybody who wants to ask a question, we want you to queue up down the center aisle, okay? And I just am asking two things of you because there may be a lot of people that want to ask questions. Please don't offer any context or any narrative, just ask a question so that Abby can get right to the answer and as many people as we can get through that line we can, okay? Fair? Okay, so if you want to ask a question, just come out and we'll give you a few seconds to get queued up. I'm going to ask Abby the first question while people are lining up, okay? Talk a little bit about the relationship that you saw during your experience between contraception, or what we would call the contraceptive mentality, and the abortion industry.
Sure. So, one of the things that we don't talk about enough is the relationship between contraception and abortion. And unfortunately, a lot of Christians, and even greater, unfortunately, a lot of Catholics believe that the answer to the abortion problem in our society today is birth control. Well, the answer is actually not birth control. The answer is self-control. But self-control doesn't make the abortion industry any money, so they're not out there pushing that to the mainstream media, right? So, but what we see is, according to the Guttmacher Institute, which is essentially Planned Parenthood's own research arm, women who have abortions, more than half of them, so 54% of women who have abortions were contracepting at the time they got pregnant, okay? So birth control is clearly not the answer. It's not stopping abortion, and in fact, in almost all peer-reviewed studies, what we see is that where there are higher rates of contraception, there are higher rates of abortion. Now, that might seem a little counterintuitive, but let me help you make sense of it. It makes all kinds of sense to me, okay? Because we know the risks of birth control, right? Of hormonal birth control. We know those risks. So we know that it increases a woman's rate of heart attack, DVT, stroke, osteoporosis. We know that there's a plethora of problems that come with hormonal birth control options. Those have all been documented, they're recorded, they're on the little label on the inside of the birth control manufacturing information. And one of the leading risks is an increased risk of cancer. So, stay with me. If a woman is so desperate to not have a baby that she's willing to take a hormonal method that will potentially give her cancer, that could potentially kill her, then I don't think it is a stretch then to say that she is desperate enough to have an abortion. So we have to start looking at what is actually best for women. Is birth control good for women? No, it's not. It's not good for their health. There are no ailments, reproductive ailments that women have that are actually healed by birth control. So if a woman has PCOS, if she has endometriosis, if she has another reproductive issue in her body, birth control is actually not healing that. Birth control is putting a Band-Aid on it. It's not treating it, it's healing it. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. It's not making you better, it's masking the symptoms, and then what could actually be taking place inside your body could be getting worse and worse and worse, but you don't know it because the birth control is masking the symptoms that are taking place inside of your body. It's masking what's happening inside of your body. So it's actually not healthy for women. In fact, the BBC just came out with an article. I cannot believe that they released it, but there was some peer-reviewed research that came out that showed that there is a significant increase of clinical depression and suicide ideation with women who use hormonal contraception. So with all of these risks out there for hormonal contraception, there's no way that we can actually say that birth control is good for women, okay? Also, birth control, now I could give a whole talk on this, so I'm going to try to sum it up. Birth control also continues to separate the marital act, and it separates sex from procreation, which was never intended to happen, okay? So it basically, fertility is meant to be shared between a husband and a wife. So a lot of times now, though, I'm sure you've seen like movies and stuff, and maybe in your own life, you get pregnant and you go to your husband and you say, "I'm pregnant," and he goes, "Well, what'd you do?" And you're like, "Well, you were there too, buddy." But a lot of times we hear men that'll say, "Well, did you miss a pill? What happened?" So it actually removes the unitive purpose of the sexual act and burdens that solely on the woman, which is not the way that sex was intended to be. That's not the way fertility was intended to be. It's meant to be a shared act between a husband and a wife. The other point is that hormonal contraception, every single form of hormonal contraception, and including the copper IUD, the Paragard IUD, works as an abortifacient. So hormonal contraception works in a couple of ways. The primary way that it works is to prevent ovulation, so an egg will not be released from the woman's ovary. But there are cases, in about 7 to 10% of the time, where an egg is released. And if that woman is sexually active during her fertile period, then that egg will more than likely become fertilized and conception will take place. The backup mechanism of birth control is that the birth control will cause the uterine wall to become hostile to the fertilized egg. So this newly created baby will not be able to implant on the uterine wall, therefore causing a spontaneous abortion. Okay? We cannot say that we are for life beginning at conception, that we are pro-life beginning at conception in one breath, and then say that we are also for hormonal methods that extinguish life that has already been conceived. You can't have it both ways. So there are multiple ways that hormonal contraception is damaging the family, that it's damaging marriages, it's damaging our society. And I always tell people my war is not against birth control, but my war is against our silence on birth control. Women deserve better than the health care that's being thrown to us at the doctor's office. We deserve better. Can you imagine if you were like, you go into a cardiologist and they're like, "Oh, what's going on today?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, everything's working great. Heart's perfect, blood pressure's great, cholesterol's great. Can you make it so that I have a heart attack?" The doctor would be like, "What's wrong with you? You need a psych eval," right? Yet that's what women do every single day when they walk into medical offices with completely healthy fertility. By the way, fertility is a sign of health in a woman and a man, and they walk into a doctor's office and say, my fertility is all set, I could totally get pregnant, break that. That's not health care. And that's really not the proper care of women, and women should be demanding better health care for themselves.
Hi, I wanted you to know I had no intention on coming up here. You speak the truth the way I talk to people. Talking about what can you do, there are people like me who can't stand in front of an abortion clinic, but I belong to a rosary group at St. Peter and Paul in Beaver. We've created a chaplet for the unborn and for women who have had abortions. If anyone would want to come and join us, please contact the parish house. We have, within our group, we meet 4 times a month.
Awesome.
We turn out thousands of rosaries for addiction, for missions, and we've just started this. We have on the a medallion of Our Lady of Guadalupe because she is pregnant and ready to deliver.
Yes. That's awesome. Yeah, and there are lots of ways. There are so many ways that, just like that we can get involved in the pro-life movement. Maybe you can't go out and stand in front of a clinic. That's okay. You can start a rosary group. You could start a group and crochet and knit baby blankets for your local pregnancy resource center. You could host a baby shower for your pregnancy resource center. And you could do a diaper drive and collect diapers. There are a lot of creative ways. A lot of times moms, stay-at-home moms will reach out to me and they'll say, you know, I'm at home, I'm raising my kids, I want to do something in the movement, what can I do? First of all, if you are at home raising your children, if you are at home being a stay-at-home mom, you are doing the most important pro-life activity that any of us can do, okay? But if you want to do something a little bit more, if you want to get active in the pro-life movement, hands-on, one of the things I tell people is that on these different websites, so thebump.com, babycenter.com, there's a lot of different pregnancy websites, and they all have chat features on them. And a lot of times what we see almost every day, there's a woman posting in a chat group saying, I just found out I'm pregnant, I'm considering an abortion, can somebody help me? So it's a really great opportunity for these moms to go on there and to say, hey, where are you located? Look up a closest pregnancy center, give them that information. Hey, I would love to talk to you about your situation. How can I get you plugged in to help? A lot of times women nobody wants to have an abortion. The whole idea of being pro-choice is really a lie. Women don't have abortions because they're walking in saying, oh, I'm so excited to exercise my right to choose today. They're walking into abortion clinics because they feel like they have no other choice, because they're out of options. And sometimes they just need somebody to say, hey, what can I do to help? What do you need? Can you pick up the phone and call me right now? Can we just chat? Can we talk about your situation? What can I do? How can I accompany you on your current journey? And so sometimes that's enough, and you can save babies that way. We have so many stories of stay-at-home moms who are policing those chat boxes, and they're looking and they're ministering to women who are on there who are feeling confused and alone. So there are so many creative ways, awesome ways that you can get involved in the pro-life movement.
Abby, what are the prospects that a network will pick up Unplanned and broadcast it nationwide?
Oh yeah, it's not going to happen. No, I mean, no secular network wants
Even
that film.
EWTN or?
Oh, EWTN might. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they might. But like something like ABC or TBS or, you know, none of them would do that. But for those of you who are wondering, Unplanned is available on Amazon streaming. It's also available at Walmart and Target, and it's available online at Amazon if you want the actual DVD or Blu-ray. So there's lots of different options where you can see the film, and I mean, I would love for that to happen. Maybe in a couple of years, EWTN would pick it up and air it. That would be awesome. Yeah.
Could you talk about the impact of people praying in front of the, I call them abortion businesses because that really is what they are. But I think at one point you were talking about being at a convention of Planned Parenthood and that session. So if you could share that with us. Thank you.
Sure. So I always forget to share that. That's like, thank you for bringing that up. This is a really important point. So talking about going and praying outside of abortion facilities. So people say, I don't know if it really makes a difference, Abby. I mean, who knows? It may not make any difference at all. So the last Planned Parenthood conference that I went to in 2009, I actually went into a session that was called Anti-Choice Harassment. Okay, so that's all of us. And they were talking about, they had actually looked at the data regarding patient appointments and correlated that to when people are standing outside in front of abortion facilities. So what they found is that when there are people standing out in front of abortion facilities praying, the no-show rate, so women who have appointments but then just don't show up for their appointment, goes as high as 75%. So the truth is this: you don't know what sort of impact you're having on the women and the men that are driving by. All the time, I go out to the clinic, all the time I hear people will drive up and they'll say, all the way here I was praying for a sign. I was praying that God would give me a sign. I pulled up, I saw you here, you guys are my sign. So you just never know the impact that you're going to have. I mean, we'll know when we get to heaven. We'll see all of these babies that we're that we'll get to meet eventually, that were saved from abortion. But I think the important thing is that we're out there, that we are being a witness for life, and that we are showing these women that there is something morally objectionable to what they're doing. So, I mean, like, I go to the dentist, and there's like nobody standing outside going like, don't have your cavity filled, right? Like, please go to the dentist, right? Like, it's a good thing. But by standing there, you are showing these women that walking into that clinic is not normal. What they're doing inside of that clinic is not normal. And sometimes just that is enough to make a woman really contemplate what she's doing and to cause her to either continue to drive or to turn around and walk out of that appointment. So your presence is incredibly important on the sidewalk.
Abby, first of all, thank you for your witness, your service, and your inspiration. You commented and kind of joked earlier that during your time at Planned Parenthood, the abortion science of the day was that a pregnancy magically turned into a baby when it was wanted. I'm not a medical person, though I work in a medical field, and I like to believe that today, it's pretty decisive, if not proven, that life does begin at conception. I think that's pretty much a medical science fact, at least I hope so. In your legislative involvement, why do you think that abortion is then still legal today with that almost being a proven fact? And I think that the insights into that might be some illustration of what we have to battle to make abortion unthinkable, not just illegal.
Yeah. So it's a good question. So yeah, I mean, I think that almost all scientific texts, almost all embryology texts do state that life begins at conception, pretty much, or even if they don't say conception, it's either conception or implantation. It's one of those two, right? So any abortion then is going to be after that point, right? So you would say, okay, well, then any direct interruption in that life continuum then is intentional killing, right? So that would be wrong. But we're not really dealing with logic here. And we're not really dealing with science. I mean, I posted something just, I think yesterday on my Facebook page talking about scientific fact, okay? Talking about gender and talking about the unborn. These people who oppose truth, they're not thinking logically about these issues. So it's very easy for them to say, well, it's all about a wanted pregnancy, not about it being a baby. They don't even want to recognize that it's a baby. You can throw science at them, and they don't care. They shut down. They don't want to hear it, right? All they'll say is, that's not what science says. So you're like, well, then what does science say? Well, not what you're saying. Okay, well, then tell me what it says. And then they're like, why are you pushing religion down my throat? And I'm like, what? You know, so they're not using logic. They're not using any sort of facts when they're arguing their positions. You know, they're using emotion, and emotions change, feelings change. Doesn't mean they're not valid, but they change, and so that's how they want scientific reality to be as fluid as their emotions. And that's just not the way science works. But they've bent it in their minds to be fluid. As far as the legislation goes, look, we're not going to be able to do anything anywhere until Roe is overturned. Roe and Doe are overturned. And we're not going to be able to do that until we have a favorable Supreme Court. And I don't believe that we have that right now. I think we need one more, which is why our 2020 election is so incredibly important. If you're a Democrat, please vote third party. If you're a Republican, please do not. The election's very important because I do think that we will get at least one, if not two, more Supreme Court justices. And we are, I don't think that we have a majority. We can't trust Roberts, and I don't think that he would vote to overturn Roe. And so we would have to bring the right kind of case. I personally think the right sort of case would either be a personhood case or a heartbeat bill. Those are the two cases that I think. It's not going to be a dismemberment bill. It's not going to be a particular type of ban on abortion, because Roe is already very clear that you cannot ban abortion in the first or second trimester. So that's not going to do it. The only thing that's going to overturn Roe is a scientific argument that shows that life should be preserved in the first or second trimester. That's it. So I believe that heartbeat bills and personhood bills have the best shot of doing that. But I think we're a ways away, honestly. But we need to definitely be praying for this next election. It is critical that we get an anti-abortion president back in the White House, because if we don't, the consequences for the unborn will be dire.
How many more questions do you want to take?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Sharon. Thank you for coming to Pittsburgh.
Of course.
Have you any suggestions for the best way to approach like a group of teenagers today?
About abortion, or?
About, trying to talk them into going to the march, going on the bus to the march to Washington.
Tell them you'll feed them for free.
Yeah, okay, done that.
Kids like food. That's generally enough to get my 13-year-old to go anywhere. It's a fun experience. It's something that they'll never experience any other time in their life. And, if they're sometimes doing things like fundraising as a group to go to the march seems to really help build camaraderie and something that they're, trying to do something with a purpose that they're trying to work for. And so that gets them more excited about going. But yeah, I think the promise of food and the promise of a really fun experience. Free matching t-shirts, get them like fun t-shirts. They like that. Yeah. Those fun beanies, that's kids, that's teenagers. They want free stuff and they want to look cool doing it. So, but it's important. I mean, does this diocese take buses of people? Yeah. So does what? Oh, this parish. So just saying, yeah. So I mean, I think just, and if you can get a group of them to go with their friends, they're not going to go if they don't know anybody else that's going, but if you can encourage a group to go, they're more likely to go together. So it's a great experience for them to do. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, to answer her question also, they get a free day out of school.
Yes.
Okay. Also, they get community service.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so that's credit towards community service.
That's good.
My question to you, Abby, is would you give me permission to issue a challenge to the congregation here?
Sure, do it.
So,
do it fast.
You all have, you're all here because you have a passion and you care about what's happening. We are killing babies in our country. So, as you said, we all are given gifts and we all have talents. And it's time to uncover your talent, dig it up, or use your talent now, and there's lots of ways to do it. What the lady that just asked about that, you can go, we can go, everybody here knows their church group, their church, their school, Christian school, Catholic school, and go and ask permission to talk to 7th and 8th graders at the CCD classes and in the schools. And right now it's not easy to do it, but you have a goal, which is to get them to go on the March for Life on Friday, January 24th. It's like, give me 5 minutes, give me 10 minutes, give me 15 minutes in the school, in the class, and actually the instructors are happy to have somebody talk anyway, because it's work to talk for an hour at a CCD class. So I challenge everyone here to get active, either talk, if you have a gift of talking, go talk to these kids. If you get your men's group involved and your women's groups involved at your churches, and if there's no pro-life movement, start one. There is one in my church, and I just found out about it. The other thing is get involved with the volunteer groups, first of all, we talked about sidewalk advocates. Sue McGrath, would you just stand up real quick? Sue, just stand up. Just stand up, please. Okay, see that lady with dark hair? That's Sue McGrath. She's the director of sidewalk advocates. If you want to help out downtown in front of Planned Parenthood, we need help. Also, Nikki Bruni, where are you? Right there, right? Nikki, 40 Days for Life. She did all that and led the court case against Planned Parenthood in Pittsburgh. We need help. And so I can tell you right now, we do not have coverage on the sidewalk 24/7 when they're doing abortions. So we need help with that. And then if you don't feel confident standing out, there is the Women's Choice Network, there's Choices Pregnancy, there's Genesis House, there's Mary's Place, and Catholic Charities. All would accept volunteers. So get involved. To follow up on what you said, get involved. And I heard a speaker at St. Bernard's a couple months ago. She said, you know what, we need to make people uncomfortable a little bit. We need to talk about it. It's not easy to talk about. Even with my own kids, it's not easy. So I challenge you to get involved.
Thanks.
Okay. How many?
Okay, let's do, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you have a question?
Abby, this is maybe a little bit out of our scope, but you did touch on it earlier in the evening. It concerns me greatly that people do not know or understand, including parents, what is being taught in schools in Planned Parenthood's sex ed curriculum, starting in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. Like finding a way to get your 15-year-old daughter out of school to have an abortion so that her parents don't know. Could you talk about that a little bit?
I would love to talk about that, and that's how I'm going to end the night. Okay. Because this is something, I'm sorry, I'm going to be down signing books so you can ask me questions. Okay. This is something that is very, very relevant, particularly to your state. Okay? Because there have been some really scandalous things being brought into Pennsylvania school systems that are just really egregious. So I just want to sort of tell you, I want to explain to you about how Planned Parenthood sex education works in the school. So, and I'm telling you this as someone who used to be a sex educator for Planned Parenthood, okay? So I'm telling you this from my experience. So our goal was to get into the public school system starting in kindergarten. Now, we didn't begin the graphic sex education in kindergarten. That came in 2nd and 3rd grade. But we wanted to get to them in kindergarten because we wanted to develop a relationship with them when they're 4 and 5 years old. That relationship is going to be key to build trust and to get them into our facilities, and to break the bond between parent and child. I need to become the sex authority in your child's life. That's my goal by getting in there in kindergarten, okay? Another goal is to break down your child's natural modesty. So we're going to start using language I'm not going to use here today because we're in a church. But we're going to start using language that might make you blush, but we're going to start using it with kindergartners and 1st graders and 2nd graders, and we're going to make them laugh and we're going to make them giggle, and we're going to think that that's a good thing because it's breaking down their natural modesty, okay? In 2nd or 3rd grade, that's when we're going to start really getting into the graphic sex education talks. So we're going to bring things in like stuffed animals, and we're going to show them different sex positions with stuffed animals, okay? Then, when they're, 10, 11, 12 years old, they're starting to go through puberty, hormones are everywhere, raging, right? They're like little walking hormones. That's when we are going to come to them and we're going to say, listen, we know that you're having all of these feelings and we want to encourage you to explore those feelings. But you know who you can't talk to about these feelings? Your parents. Because they don't get it. They don't understand what you're going through. And they're going to tell you not to explore these feelings. And you don't want to be oppressed. You don't want somebody telling you what to do. But you know me. You've known me since you were this big. You can trust me. You can come to me with any question you might have. Then the next goal begins to get your daughters on a hormonal birth control method by the time they are 13 years old. Now, they don't need parental consent to do it. You'll never know it. We can give them a Depo-Provera shot in their arm once every 3 months. We can come to the school and do it in the nurse's office, and you will never know that your little girl is on birth control. Okay? And we're doing it with your tax money. Now, the school nurse has to call you to give your child a Tylenol. But we can give her hormonal birth control without your knowledge or your consent. Okay. But probably the most common type of birth control we're going to give her is the birth control pill. Why? Because the birth control pill has the highest human error rate, right? So remember that statistic I told you before. 54% of women who have abortions were contracepting at the time that they got pregnant, okay? We know that. That's a Planned Parenthood statistic, okay? They know that. They're going to put your kids on a method that they know is going to eventually fail. And when it does, hopefully it does, they will have had their first abortion by the time they graduate high school, and you'll never know anything about it. The school nurse can take them to an abortion clinic, have an abortion performed, bring them back to school before the end of school, and you have no idea that your child ever left campus. Okay? Now, after they graduate high school, then they go on to college. And we're going to continue to have that relationship with them. Oh, by the way, after they have their abortion, we're going to put them back on the birth control pill. You know why? Because we want it to fail again. So then when they're in college, they'll come back to us and they'll be pregnant. And we will sell them a second abortion because we'll tell them there's no way you want to be in college with a baby. So we sell them their second abortion. Then they graduate from college and they're new in their career. And they come to us again and they're pregnant, and we say, you're going to blow your career if you have a baby right now. So she has her third abortion. Our goal is for a woman to have had 3 abortions by the time she is 30 years old. And that grooming, and it is grooming, that grooming begins in kindergarten. If you are not paying attention to what is happening in the public and private schools in your area, then shame on you. A lot of Christians say, well, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't affect me because I homeschool my kids. Or I put my kids in private school so I don't have to worry about it. Shame on you. You think that you don't have to go back and fight for those other kids that nobody is fighting for? Just because you pulled your kids out of school, you think that that's the answer? Just because you're homeschooling your kids, you don't think that you have a responsibility to go back into that school and to rescue those kids who nobody is standing up for? We have a responsibility to be at every single school board meeting, to be at every school health advisory council meeting. We have a responsibility to sign petitions, to send them out, to make sure that this disgusting perversion is not in our public school system. We have this idea that, well, if it doesn't bother me, then it doesn't bother anybody. That's like saying, well, as long as a sin is private, it doesn't bother anybody. It affects everybody. It affects all of us. This is a societal issue. Guys, we have got to all be involved in this because these are children. These are babies that are being groomed and indoctrinated by our public school system with your tax dollars. And we aren't even showing up for them. Guys, we've got to do better than that. You're not done with your responsibility of protecting children just because your kids are grown and not in school anymore. We have a responsibility to accompany all of those who are in need. And our children who are being groomed in our school systems, they are in desperate need of protection. I was in New Jersey, and I was speaking for this group, and before I got up to speak, they were talking about, in New Jersey, there was a situation where this little girl, she was 11 years old, she had she was coming home every day, and she had all this anxiety, and she was crying every night before bed, and she was crying before she went to school, and her parents were like, what's going on, and she wasn't telling them. And finally she broke down and said, I don't want to go to school anymore because every day when I go into the locker room, there's a little boy in there, and he's in there watching us get dressed in the girls' locker room. And the parents thought, that's crazy, right? So they wanted to go and fix it. So they went to the school, and they said, what is going on? Why is a little boy sneaking into the locker room? And they said, oh, he's not sneaking in. He's allowed to go in because he feels like a girl. And so the solution was to pull that little girl out of school and to put her in a private Catholic school. That's not the solution. I mean, yeah, pull your kid out if you want to. Yeah, homeschool your kid if you want to. But that's not the final solution to that problem. Because what about all those other little 11-year-old girls that are being forced to get dressed in front of a little boy every single day at school? We are told that we are to defend the most marginalized among us. We are to defend those who have no voice. We are to speak up for those with no voice. We ought to do just that. And we ought to do it no matter the consequence. So our kids are worth it. Every single one of them, in and out of the womb. Every single one of them is worth it. Guys, I want to thank you for bringing me here. I want to thank you for being so engaged, and I just want to encourage you, and I want to leave you with this. People say to me, Abby, I don't know if we're ever going to win. The other side, they've got Bill Gates and Bill Clinton and stacks of bills. But in the end, we know that we will see victory. We know that we are on the winning side. We don't have to worry about the amount of money that they have on their side. We don't have to worry about who is advocating for them, because we have the most powerful advocate on our side, and that's Jesus Christ, and we will win this war. Thank you all so much, and God bless you.